Well, a very good morning, everybody. My name's Nick Peters. I have to say this is a terrific pleasure to be presenting this panel discussion at the start of the Made Smarter Conference 2021. I've been covering the Made Smarter story for getting on for 4 years now, and it's been an absolute privilege, one of the most exciting things that's happened in our sector over recent years. It's been born out of decades of UK lagging behind its competitors in the G7 and the G20 in terms of productivity and in terms of adopting new technology. We were behind in computer systems, in robots, and now automation and digital technologies. We can all debate why that came about. I think that's another issue for another day. Where we are is where we are, and there's an urgent need to get on with the rapid rollout of these technologies right across the UK manufacturing sector, which is why Made Smarter represents such a fantastic milestone on this very vital journey. It's a real partnership between government and industry to raise productivity for all and for our economy. For the next hour or so, we're going to be discussing the many achievements so far of the program and where it can go, which of course is hugely optimistic, with a very distinguished panel, many of whom will be familiar faces to you all. Jürgen Meyer, co-chair of the Made Smarter Commission and chair of the Digital Catapult. Glyn Jones, service delivery director at BAE Systems and chair of the Made Smarter Pilot Steering Group. Stephen Phipson, CEO of Make UK and member of the Made Smarter Commission. Andrea Hoff, MD of ATEC Solutions and a member of the Made Smarter Pilot Steering Group and Made Smarter Commission. Donna Edwards, Managing Director of the Growth Company and Made Smarter Northwest Adoption Program Director. And Matthew Ellis, Assistant Director of Made Smarter for the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, known to us all fondly as BAIS. Now, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. There's a chat box. Just send questions to the panel. I'll put them to the panel. I'll get them to the individual participants right away rather than storing them up for a Q&A session at the end. So do take this opportunity. If you've got a question in your mind, ask it right away. I can't promise to pass them all on, but I'll do as many as I can. So this is an opportunity for you to speak to people at the very heart of the Made Smarter initiative. I'm going to start with Jürgen because Jürgen is in many ways where it started. Jürgen, this was an initiative 10 years in the making. A lot of us, I mentioned 4 years earlier, getting on for 4 years. You'd been plowing this furrow a long time before that. You must be delighted that we're all sitting here discussing it today.
Indeed, Nick, it really is such a pleasure. And you are right, the journey started a very long time ago when we realized that we really had to make a difference in terms of transitioning to this fourth industrial revolution. Because as you rightly pointed out in your introduction, we didn't make such a brilliant job of transitioning into the third. So a whole group of manufacturers, and of course, Stephen Phipson as part of that, BAE Systems, and Andrea here have been part of this movement for many years also. We're proud that we've got to this stage where we've got this conference today. I'm hearing that listening to us are over 300 people, maybe nearly 400, getting part of this exciting movement to create a fourth industrial revolution. And that is great.
Glyn, if I can turn to you, BAE Systems, huge company, of course, and the focus of Made Smarter has been on smaller companies within the supply chain throughout the UK. How important is it from BAE Systems' point of view for smaller companies in your supply chain to be digitally connected to you, which of course is what these technologies allow?
Well, thank you, Nick. What we've learned, particularly in recent times, is that the company relies heavily upon the supply chain, and we are only as strong as our weakest link. And in effect, we employ literally hundreds of different companies across the Northwest in support of our products. And it's fair to say that they've been having quite a tough time in the last 12 months because a lot of people that support BAE Systems actually support the civil aircraft sector as well. And what we've found is that the use of digital techniques in the supply chain has helped them become more resilient and actually help them through some challenging periods. And so we've been expanding our adoption of digital into the supply chain as a way of generating greater resilience and making us stronger going forward.
Stephen, as someone who knows the corridors of power in Westminster and Whitehall better than most, would you agree with what I said, that Made Smarter represents a real achievement for public-private partnership?
I would indeed. I mean, I think it's borne out by the results, Nick. I think that's very important. And I think people are starting to, well, not starting to, but they're on that journey, bearing in mind we have a lot of new people in government, relatively speaking, to understanding exactly the importance of Made Smarter and the digital revolution that's happening in manufacturing. It's just worth just pausing for a minute on the pandemic and the point that Glyn was making about the effect on manufacturing. I mean, whilst we saw overall last year a 12% decline in manufacturing output, one thing that the pandemic did do is accelerate a lot of digital collaboration. And really that comes out very strongly in our survey results. You know, when we did our survey at the end of the year, the awareness of Made Smarter, the awareness of digital techniques was up at 90%. And we contrasted that to a year before where it was only 50%. So actually, not only have we got the message out there amongst manufacturers, we've also got the message to government. I mean, again, the fantastic work that was done to repurpose a lot of manufacturing capacity in the national effort really brought into sharp focus, particularly with the Prime Minister, the importance of a resilient national manufacturing sector. So really bringing those points together, part of our job, Nick, to make sure that all the resources are applied now to really accelerating the programme. We've got the awareness there, we've got the understanding from government. Now's the time to power forward with it, Nick.
Absolutely. Andrea, if I can turn to you, ATEC has a very proud 75-year history in the aerospace sector and is indeed itself very much a showcase for what Made Smarter can do for SME manufacturers. Just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Thanks, Nick. We started probably like a lot of these small businesses that approached the Made Smarter pilot scheme, just really trying to sort of take stock of, I think Jürgen mentioned it, you know, did we even know that we'd been through the third industrial revolution? Never mind, we had to start this journey onto the fourth. And we really struggled with how such a small little manufacturer who doesn't have a lot of automation could actually benefit from it. So we started at the beginning by doing a data mapping process with Made Smarter. And that entailed a 2-day program of looking where all our data was in the business and how we could link that together to better understand even what our productivity levels were. We've heard so much over the last few years of we're behind on productivity levels compared to the rest of Europe. But, you know, businesses like mine didn't understand really what that meant. So I think the very first stage for us was actually recognising that we all have so much data. And data is really important when you're trying to make changes in your business. So for us, we started with the data program, looking how we could link all that together. And alongside Made Smarter, we put a program together, which then allowed us to go on. And we've done a couple of projects under Made Smarter. We've had one of our senior managers do the leadership program. So we're trying to embed in the business the whole idea of change and how technology can help us. And I think, as Stephen said, it probably came to the fore even more in the last year because of COVID. And how do you communicate with people? We weren't even using video conferencing. We didn't know about Zoom. We didn't know about Teams. And we moved on so much. You know, we went to just those little step changes of having some webcams that were available to people so that we didn't have to get within the 2 meters. We found a company that did, for a completely different reason, these sensors that we all wear around our necks that bleep when you're within 2 meters. So some really basic step changes really got the business and a lot of our sort of, you know, quite frankly, older workforce more engaged with what technology could do. So for me, the whole process has been learning those tiny step changes really make a difference. And when you look at the case studies for all the businesses that Made Smarter have helped in the Northwest, it's just amazing. They're all the different businesses, from bakeries to machining companies to food manufacturers. We've all done it differently, but I think most of us have started with recognizing that data is key to change.
There are going to be a lot more companies talking during the conference today, telling their stories. And every time I've spoken to any of them, I have to say it's almost thrilling to hear that, the scales fell from their eyes when they saw what was possible, how they could change the very fundamentals of their business and become so much more productive. Donna, you've been at the front line of implementing Made Smarter in the Northwest as the program director. I know there's a fabulous infographic somewhere, it's probably in the conference website or wherever, but just try and distill some of that success story for us so far.
Okay, I think we were launched in 2019, and we thought it would be a fairly quiet launch, but we were inundated with SME manufacturers contacting us to find out more and understand how we could help. And I think the whole premise of the pilot was to test and learn. And how do we get manufacturers to engage in technology on a subject area that lots of us feel really uncomfortable in? So we had to learn, and that's part of what the pilot was about, was to test and learn what was going to resonate with manufacturers to give them the confidence to actually take that step to get a better understanding of their business. So to date, we've had 1,200 manufacturers who've engaged with us. We've supported 550 of those with advice and guidance, and the information and guidance we give is agnostic of suppliers. It is really truly based on what the needs of the business are. We've funded and supported 182 adoption projects so far, and a really good pipeline still in place. And that's entailed around 3.6 million of grant funding, but there's 10 million being invested by those companies that we're working with. So with a contribution to those projects, we give them confidence to take that step. And as Andrea says, the first stage is to do that sort of strategic view of the business about what could be done, and then actually prioritizing the way in which you do that. So you don't go for the big bang, you just break it down into manageable chunks. And you do one thing and it doesn't quite do what you thought it was going to do, and then you can modify what you do next. So we're trying to break that elephant down. We've also had 50 sort of interns, graduates working with some SMEs to give them some, digital natives, they've grown up with this, that can work with the leaders and the staff in the business to actually give people confidence. And of the, 14 of those have been offered jobs by those SMEs, because they can then see the value of having somebody with that skill set in the business. And also, Andrea referenced the leadership management program that we've done in partnership with Lancaster University as well. In terms of design a digital adoption leadership program, it's been changed through feedback with the attendees that have been on there, and we're now scaling that up and rolling it out through other universities.
That is a terrific record so far, and I'm sure there's much more to come, and does indicate to the extent to which Made Smarter has had a ripple effect, not just in terms of adopting technologies inside SME manufacturers, but throughout skills, academia, and so on. Matthew, if I can come to you at the end of this sort of first round, whip round questions. I called Made Smarter a milestone in the journey towards building a digital manufacturing sector in the UK. But it is also a fantastic example of what can be achieved when government and industry both put their shoulders to the wheel, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, it certainly is. So I guess, first of all, to just say thank you to all of the the excellent industry representatives who've supported Made Smarter. I mean, Jürgen, who led the work on the Made Smarter review, and has continued to to show incredible leadership as we've moved forward with the program. In terms of the kind of Bayes vision for the pilot, I suppose it's worth just saying a little bit about that, and how we see the role of working with industry and really making sure that we're focused on the key challenges and the key barriers. Support through Made Smarter is designed to be open to all manufacturers, across the sectors. So it's not focused on any one sector. So having a really representative set of industry figures that we work with is incredibly important. and we wanted to start from the business challenges with the manufacturers that we work with through Made Smarter. We wanted on the adoption side to understand where it is that the SMEs struggle, and I think Andrea gave a fantastic sort of exposition there of exactly the difficulties that SMEs face in adopting digital technology. And so we tried to stay really close to the business challenges and to try and address them. And it's fantastic to have people like Glyn, chairing the program board in the Northwest and really keeping us focused on those industry challenges and making sure that we're staying true to those. Well,
thank you. I'm delighted to say we have a question. It's from Mark Corbett, who's with the Food and Drink Federation. Mark says, food and drink is the UK's largest manufacturing sector. Could it benefit from a focal point, like the Faraday Institute, for instance, to raise its profile in government? Now, this is possibly not quite Made Smarter territory, but it's an interesting one in terms of how something like that can enable understanding throughout a sector. Who can I throw that one at? Stephen, perhaps I can throw that one to you first.
Sure. So, obviously, we work very closely with the Food and Drink Federation, and we're all involved in those discussions with government to try to focus on the issue. I think one thing that's certainly come up recently, which is a focal point, and it goes to some of the experience of last year, Nick, is around supply chain resilience. And in the food sector in particular, this is vital because we've got very short supply chains and we've got very much just-in-time deliveries and all of that aspect of it. And digital can help a lot in that area. We already have quite a lot of activity in the food and drink area on the digital agenda, but there's a lot more to do, particularly around the smaller manufacturers, and a lot more interconnectivity that needs to happen on the digital side. So you're right, and it's brought out quite strongly and very often in terms of this resilience discussion that's going on now in government, and actually something that we're pressing on with. So like many other subsectors of manufacturing, there is sometimes a focus on a specific issue, a lot of which has arisen as a result of the pandemic, which can drive the digital adoption agenda. And that's where we need to focus. So completely agree. And that's probably the area that we need to focus on, Nick, I would say, on the food and drink side.
Thank you, Stephen. A question from Michael Catling. The Northwest adoption pilot has clearly been successful. How can businesses outside the Northwest start their journey? I was about to say that was a $64,000 question. I suspect it might be a little bit more expensive than that. Can I put this one to Jürgen, please?
Yes, may I just also, Nick, just quickly, I think that previous question was a very important one. So I'll just say a quick word on that as well, which is, I think there's two answers to that question about sector specific. So the first is we did purposely design the program to be cross manufacturing sector, as Matt had said in his introduction, because especially on the adoption side, we do think there's a lot of cross learning to be done. And indeed, that's exactly what the pilot has found. There's some brilliant case studies of manufacturers making puppets, windows, and of course companies in the aerospace and food and beverage sectors, and they can all learn from each other. So I think there is a very cross-learning aspect. Having said that, I think when you get into the innovation part of it, where we've also got a program as part of Made Smarter, where we're going to create some digital innovation hubs that are going to look at more detail in terms of the technology you want to configure for your manufacturing. I think there's a big opportunity to then look at, what does this mean specific to food and beverage or an aerospace application? And we're certainly planning to do that in some of those. In terms of your question, the second question, which was about the scaling up of into other regions. I am delighted, and we can almost make it as a bit of an announcement, although the official BAYS announcement has already been made, that we have now started the program of beginning to scale up activities and learning from what we've done in the Northwest into 3 further regions, which is the West Midlands, which is Yorkshire and Humber, and the Northeast. And obviously, we want to keep going after that. So the program is truly going national.
I wonder if I can ask Donna about that. Given the reception you've had so far, Donna, and the uptake and the engagement you've had from manufacturers, what would you say to, I don't know if Michael Cackling was asking from an SME outside the Northwest, but what would you say to manufacturers outside the Northwest who have been wondering about Made Smarter and wondering perhaps if this is something that's going to come their way?
I think it's a real opportunity for them. We've got some really good case studies. So if they're unsure, the website has been designed so that it can be extended to other areas as well, so that we can start to build that bigger momentum and movement. And I think, we had a lot of interest from other areas when we initially launched, because people were saying, well, can we have that as well? And I think for manufacturers who operate across areas, then actually there's a more consistent message to those manufacturers. Yes, it's in the Northwest, but, potentially they've got other suppliers in other areas that they would love to be able to engage and get them more digitally enabled, that they haven't been able to do that. So I think this as a message is much easier as a bigger story to tell, because people, aren't located in one area. They don't just get their suppliers locally. A lot do try and do as much as they can, but that consistency across, particularly, the North, as this will extend across and down into the West Midlands, that's going to be great. And I think it also broadens the pool of specialists who can engage within businesses as well. So that's important, having the right team in place. So hopefully other people can hit the ground running much more quickly than we did, as we had to sort of ramp up and learn how to do what we're doing and what worked.
Andrea, as somebody who very much at the forefront in terms of your own business and adopting these technologies to help you improve your productivity, can I ask you a maybe an intrusive question? I don't know, but why did you wait until Made Smarter came along to do it? Was it an awareness issue? Was it something that just wasn't on your radar, this adoption of digital tech? And if that was the case, where does the responsibility for that lie?
I think it's an interesting question. I think we are, as you said in the introduction, we've been around for a long, long time. Our products are quite old products. We're in the legacy supply business. And I think probably not consciously, but subconsciously, we probably just let that pass us by, because our technology, our product technology is quite old. And probably just didn't recognize that actually there is so much more that you can do, that we don't have a lot of machines that we can automate, that we can get to talk to each other, that we can do preventive maintenance on through digital technology. But we recognize actually that we have a lot of processes that we can get better at, and just looking at things differently. And as I said earlier, for us, it was about the better use of data to enable us to make those decisions. So now we're more aware of perhaps how long things are taking us, what other opportunities there are there by working with Made Smarter. It's allowed us to look differently at things. And having put our operations manager through the leadership course, there was an awful lot he was saying to me yesterday that he probably already knew and was aware of for some time, but it actually made him focus, hearing other people's stories about what they were trying to do. And as I said as well earlier, if you look at some of the case studies, which obviously being part of the pilot and the commission, I was quite privy to quite early on, it did make us realise that actually it doesn't matter how small your business is, what technology you use in your business, there is always an opportunity to do things differently. We're looking at one of our we're small batch as well, small volume, but we're looking at one of our product lines to automate that, to look to see whether we could use some robotics in that process. And on our flow solder line, we're looking to see how that we can incorporate preventive maintenance on that as well. So I think, in answer to your question, it probably was a little bit of ignorance, but also a little bit of thinking we weren't a business that could actually benefit from digital technologies. And the more we've looked at it, the more we realised we're actually part of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund for the Smart Factory. And it's just being involved in those things. You just realise how many opportunities there are out there to improve your productivity, your process controls.
Thank you. Matt, if I can turn to you. Quite obviously, the country, the sector, has been on a terrific learning curve about digital tech in the last 4 years. Thanks very much to the leadership of Jürgen and other industrialists who spent so many years trying to drag it into centre stage. Has the government itself been on a learning curve, beginning to understand just how nimble, agile and brilliant manufacturing can be with the adoption of digital technologies? I think you may be muted, Matt.
Sorry, I am.
Phrase of the year.
So sorry. Yeah, so I think the government certainly has been on a learning curve, and it's been with the support of of people like the guys on the call today, helping to make the case for the importance of digitalization. And I think it's awful in some ways to say, but I think the pandemic has really brought into focus for government just how important the adoption of digital technology is. I mean, it's from business continuity and helping businesses to keep operating through the pandemic when they can't be there in person necessarily, to understand, to having better visibility across the supply chain that Glenn was talking about earlier, to being able to reconfigure lines, production lines quickly so that you can shift production to sort of critical materials. And I mean, the manufacturing sector has really stepped up through the pandemic. From production of ventilators to production of PPE, and to production of vaccines, and it's been, I think, really incredible the role that digital technology has played in that, and it certainly has kind of landed with the government, and brought kind of really into focus the importance of the work that we're doing through Made Smarter.
Yeah, I think, having said all of that, and I agree with you totally, Matt, it'd be wrong not to mention the ventilator challenge and the role that Dick Elsey at the High Value Manufacturing Catapult played in leading a dissipated, or disparate, should I say, dissipated workforce, atomized workforce, using digital technologies to do something absolutely incredible. Stephen, I guess it would be a terrible shame if nationally, governmentally, institutionally, we allowed the lesson of, if I can call it, the pandemic pivot, to be lost, to just fade away. We should keep this memory very strong, very alive, to help us all drive forward.
Oh, absolutely, Nick, and we can do, because we have a number of enormous challenges ahead.
I think
I've frozen.
Stephen.
Did I freeze? Did I freeze for a second then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, please pick up, Stephen. Please pick up.
Okay. So I was saying, yes, you're right. We need to maintain momentum. We have a number of very significant challenges ahead of us, where digital manufacturing will play a key part. Net zero. I can tell you, we've already started those discussions with government on the big challenges around net zero, and what a great opportunity for digitization for manufacturing, because that helps with efficiency. It helps with all the new product sets and industries that are going to be created around that, for example. And really, it's those new areas we need to continue that momentum with. Now that we've demonstrated it, Nick, we have a great role to play in the future. And it's that message that we are pushing very hard with ministers. And I do sense a really clear recognition that that's there. I mean, on the other part of it, and I mentioned this before, supply chain resilience. Don't underestimate the changes that are going to happen now as a result of what happened last year. And in terms of people mapping their supply chains, or actually onshoring or changing the way they're doing things, digital technology is going to be a key part.
Hello. I think we may have lost Stephen again. Yep. Okay. Sorry, Stephen. But digital technologies are going to play a key part in that. Absolutely, he said, finishing his sentence for him. Glenn, can I ask a question of yourself? Because people assume that large companies are well up to speed with all this newfangled stuff, and that, smaller companies are always playing catch up. Is that actually the case? I get the sense that large companies actually find it difficult to be at the very forefront of technology all the time, that smaller companies can actually steal a march by being more digitally agile.
Yeah, you're absolutely true. And I'll answer that from a personal perspective, and then I'll answer it from a business perspective if I can, because I think part of the digital transformation journey is a journey you have to go on yourself personally as well. So over a year ago, I was the leader that insisted everybody was in the room, and I had to see my customers face to face, and we had to do everything, in a very personally connected way. And I've got to say, during the last 12 months, I've learned a huge amount about how business can be done. So there's something about personally how you go through this journey yourself. And I've, my technology in my home and everything I do has come on leaps and bounds as part of this journey. From a business perspective, I think that the key word is collaboration. Jürgen used it before, but it's absolutely true. And BA Systems and big companies absolutely don't have all of the answers. In fact, increasingly we're learning to collaborate. Just one example: we're developing a factory of the future in Lancashire, and we have 40 different partners involved in that one activity. And they are universities, they are small companies, they are gaming companies, they are Williams, the racing car, company. And so we're extracting where best practice lies and trying to bring it all together. And our experience is that if you can, get government, and academia and small businesses together, thinking from different lenses, you end up with a fantastic outcome.
Well, that's. I think most people would absolutely agree with you. Pardon me. I've got a question for Andrea from Linda Jameson. Would it be possible, Andrea, to explain a bit more about the data mapping process? I don't want to spend hours talking about the minute details of this, but can you just explain, how that worked for you, so that somebody who's thinking of this might glean some benefit from it?
We worked with Made Smarter and on a 2-day program. So the start of that program, I included my operations manager, my finance, my engineering manager, and myself, because we've all had disparate systems around the business that did various things for us, but weren't really connected. And we knew a way to move forward would be to better connect those. So on the program, we literally, using some software that they put together, which was just a project management software, and we had to do it virtually the second day. But the first day, we literally worked around a board, and we put lots of stickers on the board of all the different systems we had, just to show ourselves really, or for the company to realise just how many different little systems we had that just didn't talk to each other. And then the second day really was all about trying to draw those lines around the systems that we wanted to be able to talk to each other. So if we were going to move towards a smart factory where we had no paperwork on the shop floor, how could we do that? And it became obvious that there were lots of different stages we needed to do. There was a data cleaning exercise that we needed to do. There was more training on how people could connect the systems together. But fundamentally, it was just getting people in the business to recognize how important data was. So during the second day, we had to create a project plan, a list of actions of how we were going to work through this program. And then there were follow-up sessions where they checked in with us just to make sure that we'd done what we said we were going to do within the timescales. And that was really important as well, because most people will know that when you do some training, quite often when you get back to the office, you don't get the chance or the opportunity to really action everything. So the whole program was really focused. We did it in about 3 weeks, probably just over 3 weeks, because we knew we needed to keep the momentum going. And we've just worked through that program ever since. So as I said before, we're now on this road to our smart factory. So we're going paperless on the shop floor. And that's probably using technologies that a lot of other businesses have been using for years. But we're now into dashboards for our data. We've taken a lot of examples from people like the Made Smarter and Donna's page on a plan on a page. So it was just, again, as I said earlier, breaking it down into small stages, but keeping really focused. I think somebody else said that earlier as well. I think it was Donna. Don't bite off too much. Just take your time and work your way through it.
Yeah, thank you. A question from Barry Leahay, Playdale Playgrounds, who'll be very familiar to many of us. Barry says, and Playdale's worked quite closely with Made Smarter. He's interested what data there is as a region in the Northwest on how it's improving productivity. Donna, perhaps you can talk about the metrics on this, because as Barry says, if we should really be shouting out about the improvement this has made to productivity in the Northwest.
Yeah, and I think indications from the projects that we're working with at the moment, and I'll stress the word forecast in this. There is a whole evaluation process that is ongoing and will conclude in a few months' time, where they'll go out and validate what's happened. Is indications are we will potentially, there's £140 million worth of increased GVA for the Northwest as a result of the pilot. COVID impact, we don't know what that's going to be. We've managed to help companies create probably about, I think it's about 1,200 jobs. So, in terms of the initial noise when we first launched about, all you're going to do is lose people their jobs, we've absolutely seen the opposite to that we've created jobs working with companies. Significant numbers of staff have had their skills increased because of that digital adoption piece. And that wasn't something we'd sort of focused on in the early stages of the pilot, because it was about delivering that improvement in GVA for the Northwest. So, hopefully when we get that final evaluation piece through, then we'll be able to put our hands up and go, it actually delivered that. But the signs are very positive at the moment in terms of the impact it's had with the companies.
Yeah, I absolutely with Barry all the way. We should be shouting about the impact it's had. Jürgen, I think this is one for you. It's from Gash Buller, who's from Control 2K Limited. He says one of the greatest challenges is for SMEs to compete for funding. How can we provide funds to SMEs without them going through a complex paper chase and trying to jump too far ahead from industry 2.0 to 4.0, he says, rather than getting a more manageable step from 2 to 3, then to 4? I understand that. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, we have tried very hard in the Made Smarter pilot. And again, I think, Donna can maybe speak to that a little bit as well, to really try and simplify the process and make it, and put people there for the process as well, so that it isn't just a web portal that you're talking to. So I mean, I say, just come and, if you are in the Northwest, come and give it a try. There is another way in which SMEs, I think, can engage, which is to engage with supply chains. So, so BAE Systems, as already said, has got literally, hundreds, if not thousands of people in the supply chain in the Northwest. But so do many other companies. And a great way is to look out for projects that they're engaged with, that, you could provide some added value in terms of your products, your technology, and then get involved in that way. And then the final thing I maybe just say, and I think it's an important point to make more generally, is that the adoption program, which we're focusing on here, is in the Northwest and expanding to the other regions. There is a national Made Smarter program, which is the innovation program, where we are building innovation hubs, as I mentioned before, where there are industrial challenges you can get involved with. All of this you can find on the madesmarter.uk website. And I think there really is enough for everybody to get involved in the program.
Stephen, I wonder if I could... Oh, please, Donna. Yeah, please.
Sorry, Nick. On that point, in terms of going from industry 2.0 to 4, I think we made an assumption when we put the business case in for the pilot that SMEs would be in a particular place on their digital journey. And what we have found through the pilot is they are a further back than we thought they were, because there is no clear data capture on anything around where companies are in their digital journey. So the pilot has found that companies are further back. So we are moving companies from 2 to 3 to 4 to get them to 4. We're not going straight to 4 with companies. So I think I wouldn't want people to think, oh my God, I'm going to do this, I'm going from here to here in one go. Actually, companies are 2, 3, and some are getting nearer to 4 now. And that's part of the support with the digital experts that we employ in the team. They've done this in big companies in the main, but now are coming in and supporting SMEs. And we haven't limited the amount of time the advisors can spend with companies. That was part of the pilot, is to try and work out how much time people need to help them understand, then do something. And when do they become independent on money? And we're still trying to work that out. It will vary by company, but we are there to work with them at the pace they need to work at. And as Andrea says, just to keep in the background to say, how are you getting on, so that they keep moving forward.
Thank you, Donna. There's a question from Louise Smith from the University of Hull. I'm going to ask Stephen and Matt to comment on this, and anybody else who wants to, because I think it's a really important point she makes. Is there sometimes a lack of understanding at policy, local, national government level, and at large business level? So, Glyn, please, I want you to jump in on this as well, about how SMEs actually work, particularly at lower levels in the supply chain. If they're good, they're absolutely focused on delivering excellence day in, day out. They don't have departments that can look around for, they haven't got time to look into the future. They're so busy working on the present. And the whole process of digitalization is perhaps something they didn't even have time to get their heads around. So, Stephen, starting with you, is there perhaps a lack of awareness of what life is actually like, particularly for smaller SMEs in the manufacturing sector?
Nick, it's a mixed picture, is the honest answer. Some companies are extremely good at that with their supply chains, and I would point to, with all respect to BAE Systems, but which is a very good company, but I'd point to the automotive sector that's done a lot of work with their supply chains, for example, and other areas are further behind. One thing we do find important with SMEs, though, is collaboration. Is frozen again, strangely. Did I freeze for a second? What we see is the collaboration point important, Nick, where we can regionally get SMEs together to learn from each other. And that's been very powerful during the pandemic, digitally, but actually is increasing in scope. And people are learning a lot about how other SMEs are being able to adopt some of these new technologies. So that collaboration piece is really important, something we do in regions all around the country at the moment.
Matt, if I can address it to you and perhaps reflect some of the stuff in conversations I've had, and I know these will not be exclusive by any stretch of the imagination, that people say government doesn't understand how small business works. And we hear it a lot. Is it an accusation you're prepared to take on the chin, or do you have a defense?
No, thanks. It's a really good question. So I suppose I'll focus my sort of response on digitalisation, since we're sort of, we're talking about Made Smarter and working with SMEs to help them digitalise. I think there was an understanding, going back to the Made Smarter review, actually, of government needing to understand more about digitalisation and the impact it would have on SMEs. And that's partly what motivated the real kind of deep dive into the barriers to SMEs adopting digital tech. We found that there's a sort of confused landscape there for business support. That challenge around not having enough time, so support needing to be sort of, time sparing as far as possible and really cut to the chase quickly. And I guess some of it I think we have to take on the chin. Part of the design of the pilot was to go ahead and sort of test these approaches to working with SMEs and find out what works well and what we can do differently. So I mean, Donna talked a bit about there being a kind of a bit of a kind of gap between our expectation about where SMEs are in their sort of digital maturity, and where we're seeing that they really are through the way they engage with the pilot. And I guess, that's a learning. That's something that we that we didn't necessarily expect. That's something that that we've responded to through the way that we've delivered support in the Northwest. I think we are getting to a much more comprehensive understanding of SMEs, and we are getting, I think, to sort of best practice for how to support them with digital transformation. And I guess it's the work that Donna's doing that's really powering us with the evidence base to do that. And as we look to scale the support into other regions too, we will be building on that evidence about how best to work with SMEs so that we can do it as effectively as possible.
Jürgen, if I can sort of put part of that question to you, I guess what the question was saying, what Louise was saying was, SMEs are so stretched and they're so focused on what they're doing that they just don't have the bandwidth to deal with an issue like digitalization. Some people also say, well, if digitalization is so good, why don't companies get on and do it for themselves? Why do they need Made Smarter? Well, actually, I think what Louise is putting her finger on is that in as has happened in other countries as well, you actually need something like Made Smarter to try and shake some of this thinking loose and enable companies to get that bandwidth and to get that advice and the funding, of course. But it's actually the advice that really matters.
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that question. So one is absolutely yes, and that's the whole reason why we're creating Made Smarter. Of course, it's a learning journey for us and for the SMEs who are coming on board as we do this. And I do think there is support required, especially for SMEs, when you're in sort of earlier, slightly experimental technologies. However, I do balance that with saying that, you absolutely need at the same time to have leadership within SMEs. And I mean, Andrea just put that so beautifully in the way in which you described, very honestly, the journey that you have been in, and that there was, a bit of a light bulb moment. But then it was Andrea's leadership that then drove the acceleration of the activities within your company, Andrea. And so it's that combination of some support, but then really taking the leadership to transform it and making it happen.
Andrea, do you want to comment on that? Because that's clearly a very important point, that the leadership in SMEs, they do need to start to focus on issues like digitalization and indeed on all measures that can be taken to improve their productivity.
Yes, definitely. I 100% agree. And I think one of the things that my business, and particularly me personally, has learned over the last 2 or 3 years is that there is a significant difference between being a really good manager and a leader. And a leader has to look further outside the business, to look at good practice, to see how you at least stay on board with changes in technologies, business strategy, etc. So for me, the biggest step change was through this program, realizing that. And as Jürgen says, that sort of light bulb moment was to be a leader of a business, to be somebody who wants their business to survive. And unfortunately, probably through the pandemic, there have been a lot of businesses that didn't have that opportunity. I would absolutely agree. I think leadership is key. You've got to create some time in your day and your work life to be able to think about how do you move your business on. None of us are going to survive if we just keep doing the same thing day in, day out. And I work a lot with a lot of small businesses. And because we're involved in different organizations and help groups, you can see that change. And I think, as Donna said, when we started the pilot scheme, I think the biggest recognition we had very quickly on the quite slow scale up at the beginning was the SMEs in the Northwest didn't know what we were talking about. They didn't appreciate the, fourth industrial revolution actually meant that, because as one of the questions you posed to us, they're stuck in the second revolution. How do you get out of there? So for me, the key light bulb moment has been there is a difference between being a leader and a really good manager, general manager, and you've got to focus on how to keep up with, digital transformation, take little steps, as I said earlier.
I'm going to have a quick follow-up on that, Andrea. Because taking your people with you is absolutely key to this. You can't just apply a digital transformation to a company without taking people with you. So, Andrea, how was that bit of it for you?
Well, probably like a lot of other SMEs and a company of that's been going as long as mine. My workforce average age is probably well into the 50s. I think it's about 54. So I think probably, again, the misconception was that those people would not be able to come along with us on this digital path that we were taking. And actually, we found the opposite in a lot of cases. They were as keen as anybody else in the business to introduce new technologies. And some have been a little bit more resistant to that change. One of the key focuses of the Commission, and in fact the pilot scheme, has been to focus on upskilling as well as bringing new young people in with new ideas, and the interns have been brilliant for that. So for us, we did have a group of people, as you always do in any business, whatever size, that were really resistant to change, and they've been a little bit more of a difficult nut to crack. But actually just taking our time, and because we didn't have a lot of resource to be able to do it, it's probably taken us longer than it would a bigger business, but taking our time and educating them along the way. We haven't suddenly gone from having 42 people to 30 robots and 12 people. We haven't gone that path at all, and nor will we do. It's not that type of business. But introducing tablets onto the shop floor, large screens around the business that put up all of our daily moving figures. They've really bought into it, but it hasn't been easy. I'm not pretending for a minute that it has, but 2 years into this program, and we're in a lot better place than we were before.
Donna, can I just ask you to address that sort of workforce element of it? They're taking teams with you on the journey is a hugely important part of it. I assume that's very much part of the process that your advisors take when they go into small companies.
Yeah, and I think the mantra you'll hear us say is that technology is a tool. Actually, this is all about people. Whether it's leaders, anywhere in an organisation, you need to take your staff and your team with you. And I think what we have seen is that there's a lot of latent talent around digital within workforces that they use outside the workplace, but they haven't had the opportunity to actually use it in the workplace. So we've seen companies that have now got sort of digitally enabled production processes that they didn't have before, but all those processes have been introduced and are being managed by staff that they already employed. They just didn't know that skill set was in there. Yes, they've had to maybe bring new staff in, but actually there is a lot of talent within businesses once you unlock it. And engaging teams as being key. And we've had projects that people were very keen to get going very quickly, but actually they've then seen the benefit in slowing it down a little bit and engaging the workforce in that activity, because that way, actually, once it's operationalized, it's actually going to work much better. So it ultimately is about people and how we all have a better understanding of where we contribute. And actually, once you start opening up those conversations, then that obviously leads to bigger improvements in businesses and improving the way that you do things. And a lot of people are glad that all the clipboards around shop floors with all the bits of paper have disappeared and they just all presented on a screen. Quality is improved. And 84% of the companies we've worked with have said their productivity has improved as a result of going on this journey.
We've got about 8 minutes left. A quick question from Tim Latham, and I think this goes very much to the heart of it. When an SME manufacturer is thinking, well, what the heck am I going to digitalize? People start thinking about gathering data from their processes. But Tim's saying it's about a heck of a lot more. This is end to end, from feedstock right the way through to your customer, digitalization affects every part of your business. Glyn, BAE Systems, that must be the same for you as well. Even though you may be one of the largest in the country, this applies to you just as much as anybody.
It does, and you're right. It covers absolutely all elements of our business, and we, it won't surprise you. We invest very heavily in technology, but equally we invest very heavily on people. So, just referring to the question that was just posed around, could technology reduce jobs? Well, just give you an example. Just within Lancashire, we're taking on 270 apprentices this year. So, but those apprenticeships are in different types of skills. It might be 3D printing or robotics or digital techniques or so on. So the skills are changing to accommodate the changing nature of our business. So, but yeah, digital techniques and technology is becoming increasingly important for us, and we need to be ahead of the game in order to compete on a global footprint.
Yeah, Jürgen, I just bring you in on that. It's this sort of end to end of the entire product experience. I mean, a company setting up an e-commerce system is actually digitalizing their business, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, I'd give two answers to that. I think what's important is that, at the beginning of your digital journey, you do lay out a bit of a vision for what it is you want to achieve. That data mapping exercise that Andrea talked about, and the Made Smarter adoption team can help you with that. But then you don't actually have to implement it all at once. So don't be scared by this, that saying, you now need to implement a full end-to-end, from day one. Sounds expensive, hugely complicated. You'll never have the bandwidth. Once you've got your vision, you can then say, right, I'm going to start at the e-commerce end, or I'm going to start, as again Andrea has said, I'm going to start at the sort of the paperless shop floor end, or I'm going to put a bit of robotics in, but always have a sight on the whole journey, because a lot of it, and that's where the question is spot on, and that is a lot of it is ultimately about it all working seamlessly together and about the systems integration of all of those different systems, so they all talk to each other, so that you get the data from it all into the same system and all of that. So yes, it's a very important question, but don't let it frighten you too much.
I just think it's amazing the extent to which you can, even if you're just working something in the back office, it can make a huge difference. We've got just under 5 minutes left, and this is going to be a challenging question because it arises out of events of last week. And there may not be a hard and fast answer, but I'd like to reflect some of the nervousness of the sector around the government saying that it wasn't going to pursue an industrial strategy. Philippa Glover from CNC Robotics asked this question. What are your thoughts on ending the industrial strategy? And does that spill over into any fears around Made Smarter? Matt, I will exempt you from answering the question if you don't want to answer it, but if you'd like to have a crack, go for it.
I'm very happy to just say a little bit on that. I mean, I think that the thinking is that a huge amount has changed since 2017 and the previous industrial strategy. But that the plan to build back better really is designed to take the best of the industrial strategy forward. So this isn't the industrial strategy disappearing. This is a kind of a refocusing. And look, I think the question about Made Smarter, we are doing something that is evidence that is showing really strong impact in the work that we're doing in the Northwest and the work on innovation that Jürgen talked about. And I think the support for that through the spending review and the additional funding that we've secured to scale up support, in the Northeast, in the West Midlands, Yorkshire, and the Humber, indicates that manufacturing and digitalisation is a huge priority for the government, and that something that we're going to keep fighting the fight on.
Thank you, Matt. And Stephen, I know that you were knocking on Mr. Kwarteng's door after that. Perhaps you could give us your thoughts on it.
Well, yes, knocking on the door might be one way to describe it, Nick. We've certainly been let me put it in perspective. I think, the government's been very clear that the industrial strategy 2017 out of date, needed refreshing, which is where we were, and now we've transitioned to the plan for growth, which is a bold and ambitious plan. There's no doubt about it. I think the observation we've got there is that it does set out some grand strategic objectives. It's a little bit short on some of the detail about how we get there. And basically it's a horizontal plan, so lots of cross-cutting type initiatives, whereas in the industrial strategy we saw deep verticals, sector deals to support sectors, and a lot of work around that was ongoing. So really the question is, what do we do now? What happens to all that vertical focus that we had in the industrial strategy, and how does that translate into the plan for growth? And that's the question we're posing to governments. And what we haven't got yet is a very clear answer on that, and Matt will know where we are with the Secretary of State. But we're working with it, and we are in dialogue. And so I do hope that pretty quickly, Nick, we can come to seeing those plans form in a much more detailed sense than when we saw just the unveiling of the plan for growth and the cancellation in broad terms of what was the industrial strategy. But it's that vertical versus the horizontal approach that we need to focus on. What's going to happen to sector deals? What's going to happen to all of those deep sectoral structural issues which the industrial strategy was designed to facilitate? And of course, on top of that, we do have the new areas to focus on, like net zero, like all the other issues that we've seen. And of course, that needs a lot of detail behind it to make sure we're going to be world leaders in those areas. So I think there's a lot of work to do to fill in that white space.
Thanks. Last word to Jürgen. We've only got about a minute left, Jürgen, but we talk about optimism about Made Smarter. Let's finish on an optimistic note.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, let's do that. I mean, Stephen and myself, we've both been in dialogue with the Secretary of State on this. I mean, look, I'm going to be open about saying that I think it was a mistake to scrap it the way it's been scrapped and communicated without having the subsequent plan looking more industrial. But I am optimistic, having spoken to the Secretary of State and us as an industry working hard, that we will make the new growth plan look much more industrial as we go forward. We've had that conversation with the Secretary of State. I think we will put Made Smarter fairly and squarely within it. And we had the Secretary of State on our conference this morning committing his support for Made Smarter. I think the task ahead now is to make sure that Made Smarter, fourth industrial revolution, is firmly and squarely as part of the new growth plan, so that, it's not called industrial strategy, it's called growth plan with a strong industrial and technology focus. And I think we'll work towards that and make that work.
Well, Jürgen, thank you very much indeed. And thank you, all members of the panel, for being with us this morning. Terrific conversation. I hope all of you watching got something out of that. I thought it was terrific. I'll say goodbye now. Enjoy the rest of the day. There's so much more coming up in this conference. Have a wonderful time. Thank you to the Made Smarter team for making this possible. I'm Nick Peters. Goodbye.